Okay. Hello. Am I audible?
This is Marsha.
Unmute. Mute.
Hello, Vijay. Hello. Hello, Vijay. Is it audible? Vijay, is it audible?
Yes. Yes, sir.
Okay, fine. Thank you. Okay, thank you so much. Good evening, all of you. And it's wonderful to having you all in this webinar on this emerging trends on library technology. Before we proceed, I request you all to mute their microphone. On behalf of FOET Library, I welcome you to the participant and our esteemed guest, Professor Marshall Breeding, in this 40-minute webinar session. For some technical reason, we stay a 5 minute. I request you all to mute their microphone. I welcome Professor Marshall Breeding in this webinar. Professor Marshall Breeding is an independent consultant speaker and author. He is the creator and editor of Library Technology Guide, and we know all about his great achievement in research area, especially in library automation research. He authored a lot of books and articles and chapter of the books. Marshall has edited 8 books, including Cloud Computing for Libraries, published in 2012 to today. Now a part of American Library Association, he regularly teaches workshops and gives presentations in a library, conferences, and webinar. Professor Marshall visited India a lot of time, and he has presented a lot of presentations in various events. He is a frequent speaker in various conferences. Now, without due, now I request Professor Marshall Briding for his keynote. Over to you, sir.
Okay, so I'm delighted to be here to speak today. It looks like I need to be able to share my screen.
Volume.
It's not letting me share my screen yet. So the host needs to enable that, please. Okay.
Yes, yeah.
Wait.
Hello, sir. I request you to take your microphone and start your speech.
Okay. I need to be able to, yes. So hope you can hear me by now.
Yes.
But what you need to make it so I can share my screen. You can't show my slides unless you do that.
Yeah.
When I try to do that, it says the host has disabled screen sharing. Let me know when that's ready. Okay, good. Okay, so now you should be able to see my screens. Let me know if that's right. So I'm delighted to be here today to talk to you about some of the emerging trends and ongoing trends in the realm of library technology. Kind of looking at the global scene. I know that you are well aware of some of the trends that are happening in India, but I think it's important to have the context of what's going on in the broader world as you think about where to go in your technology strategies and the kinds of systems that you might be looking toward in the future. So that's kind of the object of what I want to talk about today. As was mentioned, I'm the creator of this Library Technology Guide website. Just want to point that out to you so you know kind of where to go for more information. All of my research is deposited in various parts of the website. So this is important place if you want to follow the trends that are going on in the library technology arena. Librarytechnology.org is the URL for that. So I focus on a lot of different companies and products. A lot of the companies that I focus on are the global companies, realizing, of course, that there are local companies in every region, every country that might not be active globally. There are just too many of those for me to track individually. Literally hundreds, maybe thousands of companies providing library technologies throughout the world. But certainly the global companies are present in almost every area. So hopefully some of these will be familiar to you. I do a lot of things in order to be able to, that are part of my research in gathering information in the library technology arena. One of those is a survey that I send to as many libraries as I can get to respond, kind of asking questions about their perceptions of their automation systems they're using currently, their plans for changing systems in the future, possibly kind of getting a reading from libraries themselves about how well their systems are working for them. So this is just one graph from that. Of course, what I want to mention is that I get responses from all over the world, but they are really concentrated in the US. Would like to see more responses from India, especially since there are just so many libraries, so many instances of automation systems in India. I don't really get a good response from India. So maybe all of you can help me by responding yourselves and by communicating with your colleagues when I send out the survey invitations. I'll be doing that in November. As I said, I don't have as much data on libraries in India as I wish that I had. Of all of the thousands or probably tens of thousands of libraries in India, I really only have a few hundred of them in my directory. So, having more data would be really important to my research. As far as I know, there's no systematic database, even in India, of all of the libraries. If there is such a thing, let me know, because I would like to be able to capture more data about the library trends in India, collection trends, all the other statistics, but especially the automation systems used. I know that so many Indian libraries use Koa, but they use other systems. So in order to be able to do the same level of trend analysis in India as other countries, I just need more data, and any help with that would certainly be appreciated. You can see from this visualization here, which are the libraries in India that I currently have in my database. It's really only a few of them. So again, any help to improve that data is an important objective for me. So let's move on to think about the library technology industry. Again, looking at it from the global perspective, and as each of you think about it, what does this mean for libraries in India, and what the resources that you have and the way that you choose to automate and do resource sharing are some of the trends that I'm seeing globally as applicable in India. Hopefully it is. One important work that I do every year is the Library Systems Report, where I get information from the major vendors about their products, their direction of development, kind of the development capacity that they have, and kind of lots of different statistics and facts and figures from the technology companies themselves, so that I can be able to kind of write this industry report that kind of provides, the current status and future trends of what's going on in the global industry. This report takes a lot of work to do, represents a lot of research, but I think it's kind of one of the seminal reports that folks look to every year in order to know what's happening in the realm of library technologies. Been doing this report since 2002, first in Library Journal, now for American Libraries, both available freely online, published in usually the May first issue of American Libraries. You can see the subtitles that the report gets every year, which hopefully captures kind of the essence of what's happening in the library technology field every year. The last one was May of 2021. So that's been a few months since then. And of course, it reflects the few months before that. So a lot of things have happened since, but that hopefully captures what was going on in the world at the time. Generally, the report tries to address what happened in the previous calendar year and kind of gone up to the time of publication. There's been a phase of activity that's been going on for the last few years. You can see some of the major business events. In the mergers and acquisitions are a big part of the library technology industry, kind of shapes the companies that are active, at least in the global arena, and then the products that are available. So, companies like ProQuest, EBSCO, are really important globally. They're important in India. I think maybe in India, they are more active in selling, making available content, but they're also heavily involved in providing technology systems. So again, I think this is a case where, what's going on globally, is beginning to impact India and other countries as well. So the big thing that's happened in the last year or two is kind of the very large companies that have emerged providing both content and technology services to libraries, and those are becoming more and more interrelated. Interesting mixture of proprietary and open source technologies that are developing internationally. And then, just these business events. So I'll show you some slides later on, but certainly the creation of ProQuest with this acquisition of Ex Libris and Innovative kind of brings together a lot of technologies there. Interesting comparisons with happened with EBSCO and its support of Folio, and of course its support for other open source automation systems that it wants to integrate with EBSCO Discovery Service. And then Innovative has launched some new technologies now that it's part of ProQuest, so it'll be interesting to follow that as it goes forward. Since then, even bigger news, Clarivate, a very large multinational conglomerate involved in lots of tools and technologies for the broader realm of scholarly publishing, has announced its intent to acquire ProQuest. That acquisition hasn't completed yet. We expect it to complete now by the end of this year. Barring regulatory approval, it will become kind of a different kind of company that we're used to in the library technology arena, where, Clarivate, multi-billion-dollar company has agreed to acquire ProQuest for $5.4 billion. So this is a massive deal that has a lot of implications for technology and libraries around the world. So a lot of events related to that, going back to 2015 when ProQuest acquired Ex Libris, the dominant provider of technologies to academic libraries globally, not so much in India. They changed owners with Aterios becoming their main investor. A couple of other acquisitions, Innovative Interfaces, an important acquisition. All of that possibly will become part of Clarivate once the deal closes. I find it interesting. I've created these visualizations that kind of show the mergers and acquisitions of each of the major companies. You can see the complexity of the companies that are involved, not only in technology, which is related, you see all of those above the middle of the visualization, and then the content acquisitions below that. So very interesting development as large companies are looking for synergies between content and technology, certainly looking for business opportunities in both of those areas. Important for libraries to kind of keep in mind how those are linked or not. I think libraries continue to insist, I think, on purchasing content independently from technology. You don't want the content that you purchase being limited by the automation system you use, and vice versa. You don't want to, if you use one automation system, then it's tied to other content. I think that independence between technology and content is something that is important to libraries. So it will be interesting to see in the future how that separation persists. Synergies, I think, are interesting, and where you can get advantages if you happen to have one system and have content from another, but not that lock you in. I think that's kind of the line that libraries are hoping to avoid. So I mentioned the Clarivate acquisition. So Clarivate is a massive company. It's made lots of previous acquisitions. So ProQuest will increase the size of that company considerably and kind of bring it into the library technology field in a way that hadn't before. So that's kind of what's going on in the business. I could show you similar sides for EBSCO and for some of the other companies. But again, all of those are available on my website. I invite you to go take a look at those if you're kind of interested in kind of the family tree of each of the companies that are involved. Let's think about some of the trends that are going on, especially in the academic library sector. I always try to make sure that we're thinking about the differences that apply in different regions, different types of libraries. We're certainly not an industry where one size fits all libraries. Every region is distinct, every country within those regions are distinct, and then public, academic, school, and corporate libraries each have their own approaches to their work. So again, you have to think about the context of the library as you think about the technology and the content and other trends. Languages and culture are a big part of that. The complexity of India for having to support its 27 official languages, for example, is an important part of libraries, but certainly adds complication to how libraries collect and describe and provide access to materials when it's across so many languages and cultures. It's a given that few libraries have all of the funding that they wish they had in order to be able to do their work. And of course, in some regions, some countries, the funding is at a much lower level than it would be in the United States and Europe and other countries that are much richer and have more resources to give to their libraries. But regardless, I think that libraries all over the world kind of do amazing work in order to be able to work with the resources that they have in order to be able to deliver the content and the services and the technology to meet their needs. As I mentioned before, there are just so many local vendors that, I think it's interesting as I go to countries to learn about some of the companies and products that are available locally that aren't used in other parts of the world. It's kind of really what makes the industry interesting, or all the kind of local variations that you see. So as I said, the academic, public, and school and corporate all have pretty much different needs, collections, electronic resources versus print. There's just a lot of differences. Again, we see the kinds of library systems used in academic libraries in the US and in other countries are quite different than the ones that are used in public and school libraries. Focusing more on the academic libraries in this talk, I think that's what most of the attendees are from academic libraries. So, obvious trends that are happening that I think you're seeing to some extent, that electronic resources are increasingly part of the work of academic libraries. The proportions between print and electronic materials that are acquired and managed is constantly changing, more electronic, less print, but the proportions vary country by country and by types of libraries as well. You can see a lot of libraries that are spending 80 or 90% of their budgets, their collection budgets, on electronic resources with a much smaller amount on print. But that isn't true everywhere. India, Latin America, I think, continue to spend larger portions of their budgets on print materials. And again, I don't have enough data to be able to track the trend specifically, but certainly there is more print to be considered in Indian libraries than others, and the portions I think are changing over time to be more electronic. Be interested to know if any of you have more specific statistics that you might be able to share. Print collections will continue to be important to libraries into the distant future. I can't imagine a time where libraries do not have print collections in some way, special collections, manuscripts, and lots of other kinds of materials, just are not the same in electronic form. I think they'll continue to be enduring interest in print. I think that even today, a lot of the studies show that people prefer to read at length in print rather than on devices. So there continues to be interest in the public in print materials. So it's important to pay attention to those trends. So along with this transition from more electronic and less print, there's a change of systems. You need to have, as electronic resources become a larger part of what the library is managing, it's important to have the business systems, the automation systems that do a responsible job of acquiring and providing access to larger proportions of electronic materials. So there was a time when electronic resource management and print resource management were handled pretty separately. I think what we're seeing now, especially in the United States and Europe and other richer nations, is the migration toward comprehensive systems that manage print and electronic resources together. Not seeing that as much in the Southern Hemisphere, with Latin America and India and other countries where we continue to have mostly separate systems between print and electronic. But again, it's important to know the global trends where these comprehensive systems, these library services platforms that I'll mention in a minute, are becoming the dominant way that academic libraries manage their collections. Again, this slide shows the proportion to the US, where looking at all academic libraries, 75% of budgets go toward electronic subscriptions, with only 20% on print. And naturally, the use of those follows the same patterns where there's kind of dramatic reductions in circulation of print resources and, spike very high increases in electronic resources. And of course, those trends were amplified during the pandemic, where so many libraries were not able to provide access to their print collections and had to go through extraordinary. Somebody needs to mute, I think. So anyway, I mentioned that there are these new systems that are coming out. Library services platforms is the name that I've given to them, and it includes a fairly small number of systems, but they're getting a lot of adoption globally. Again, somebody needs to mute. It's really hard to do.
Hello. You mute Nita Thakur, sir. I request you to mute.
Okay, better. Okay, so anyway, these are new systems that are kind of modern platform-based systems, in the same way that Google, Amazon, Facebook are kind of globally available platforms that are entirely web-based and modern. That's kind of what these new systems are trying to accomplish. A transition away from integrated library systems that are kind of these traditional server-based library or based systems and used per library per institution toward library services platforms that are these global systems that are web-based and serve many libraries at the same time. They have built-in knowledge bases that help manage electronic resources, go from portfolio-based to portfolio-based electronic resource management to say I have this package that bring all the titles in it and the coverage ranges and so forth. So those, it's kind of designed from the ground up to be modern technology and kind of modern workflows for managing kind of complex multi-format collections, including print, digital, and electronic resources. And again, just to kind of give you an idea of the global trend, these systems are really gaining ground globally, where Alma has become kind of the most implemented automation system in academic libraries in the US. Some traditional systems continue to be used, like Sierra, WorldShare, another library services platform, hasn't achieved this same level of dominance that Alma has, but it's also one of the major systems. Folio, an open source version of that, is beginning to become part of the scene. Talk some about open source software, a very important topic in India where open source is the main approach, I would say, to providing automation systems to libraries in India. And we know what that means. You have access to the source code. You don't have to pay a license fee to use it. You can download it, customize it, and use it as you please. And that's a good model. It's a very good model. Gives you a chance to kind of do more with the kind of talent that you have in technology and programming and system administration when there isn't necessarily a lot of money to spend on subscriptions to proprietary systems to the global vendors. So it's a natural fit to what I think a lot of the libraries in India and Latin America, see a lot of parallels there, have to be able to use open source software in very effective ways. There are several options in the open source arena. You probably know this very well. COA is a traditional integrated library system available as open source since 1999. Evergreen, and of course, to say that COA is probably the dominant system in India and Latin America, and probably is the most implemented integrated library system globally. Evergreen, another open source system, used only in the US, built for public libraries. Folio, we're hearing more about. Library services platform, so it's open source software, kind of this new modern approach that's based on web native platform with capabilities to manage electronic resources as well. And then other kinds of open source software. Viewfind as a discovery interface, along with Blacklight, DSpace as a repository platform, Simply as an ebook delivery platform. So lots of options in the open source arena. In the US, open source is a fairly small piece of the pie when it comes to automation systems, with a total of 15% in public libraries and 8% in academic libraries. I would say probably the trends are at least the opposite of that in India, where I would say more than 90% of libraries are using open source systems. So this is a Main Street approach that varies different parts of the world. You can currently see that COA is a very widely used system, the most used system in the world, simply because there's so many implementations, not only in the US, commercial providers, but of course in every other country as well. Again, with India, Latin America, mostly using COA, I think that's where most of the implementations are globally. Folio is another open source system that it's gaining ground. I'm sure you're hearing more about it. Created with a lot of support from EBSCO Information Services. Now, because since it's open source, they can't own that product. It's available to anyone to use without paying anyone. But EBSCO certainly has services that they increasingly are offering surrounding Folio that tie into EBSCO Discovery Service and other systems that they have. So this is not an unusual relationship between a company, large for-profit company, being involved in open source software and creating linkages with proprietary software. It's kind of a normal and unexpected approach in the library technology arena. Folio is done in its initial version. It has dozens of implementations active, and it continues to move forward. It'll be interesting to see how it ultimately ends up competing with the other more well-established systems like Alma and OCLC's WorldShare, as the system kind of becomes more mature and implemented by more libraries. So what do we expect in the future? Well, more of the same, at least. I think that academic libraries are interested in more collaboration, more efficiency in the way that they manage their collections, to be able to deal with the changes that are happening in scholarly communication. We certainly are aware of more and more interest in different models of open access to scholarly resources. How do you, it's a different way, different approach for the library to be able to manage its selection and collection of open source materials compared to the traditional model of purchasing subscriptions. So with the large changes that are happening in the publishing arena, in the scholarly publishing arena, library systems have to adapt to that, where each library is still providing a selection of materials that it considers important to its researchers, but the business model is changing between all subscriptions to transformative agreements to general open access. So the systems have to be able to accommodate those differences. Academic libraries are looking for new ways to serve their institutions, providing more support for research data management, more support for the curriculum and the way that courses take advantage of materials and resources purchased by the library, and to be able to manage copyright and those kinds of features. And then to be able to do more support for digital humanities, through text mining, and so there's a lot of kind of new activities that libraries are becoming involved in beyond just kind of providing materials. That I think is core. Collection, access, and management is core, but there's kind of more layers to library services as we look forward. Library management systems are going through this transition that I mentioned already toward more true enterprise level software as a service approach, globally deployed platforms. But the key is that more and more access to library content and functionality is happening through APIs, application programming interfaces, that allow library content and services to be accessed by kind of other kinds of technical environments, so that you don't have to only rely on library discovery services, but you can tie into kind of other kinds of ways that library users need to be able to gain access to library provided material and kind of the functionality that lives within library systems. This is a trend I'm seeing globally, but not everywhere. More collaborative implementations of automation systems that serve many institutions together in consortia, more nationally deployed systems for smaller countries, statewide systems, large regional consortia, where libraries aren't just implementing their own single standalone ILS, but they're going in with very large groups of partner libraries to be able to have a shared environment. I think in a lot of parts of the world, we will see many fewer kind of standalone automation systems as more and more collaborative automation becomes dominant. Because I think that the opportunities for collaboration and resource sharing are increasingly important to libraries. So a standalone ILS is the least efficient, the least effective, and most expensive approach to providing library automation. So I certainly expect that trend to continue. So shared technology infrastructure, I think, is part of the major trend that we're seeing globally for many groups of libraries to be able to share a system and participate in its use, contribute financially to its maintenance, and be able to take advantage of providing access to very large collections, aggregate collections to its users. So a library can go from providing access to thousands or tens of thousands of items to many millions of items to their users, which I think is important. No library certainly has the resources to buy everything that it needs for its users. More analytics. I think it's important for libraries to be able to measure and do analytics on use, on collection, content in order to be able to make strategic decisions about how the libraries operate, how to acquire materials that are of interest to their users. So I think we're already seeing, we're going to see more kind of visualization tools and analytics that really kind of probe at the data that's available regarding system use and collection and collections. I think it's important to be able to do that so that library managers have the information at their fingertips in order to be able to make strategic decisions. Like other areas of business, I think that we'll see more artificial intelligence involved in the library technology arena, though I think we have to be very careful about that because almost any artificial intelligence system is vulnerable to bias. How do you provide, a neutral approach to using artificial intelligence to be able to enhance services and do it in kind of democratic and objective ways that don't change, that are truly responsive to the trends that are happening and not introducing bias in the way that we understand and look at those trends. So that's my main reservation about artificial intelligence is that we continue to use these tools in objective ways. And of course, mobile, you got to build systems from the ground up to be able to work well on small devices. Certainly important in India, where everybody has a mobile phone and is doing more and more of their internet access and work through those. So a system that doesn't work well on a phone is really marginalizing a lot of its user base. So that's a basic expectation. So as I wind down here, I think I've talked a little bit longer than I meant. A few observations is that, again, looking at global context and what happens in wealthier countries is different than what would happen in those with fewer resources. But regardless of those levels, it's important to be aware and of the potential, the opportunities that can be accomplished, even though, can't be unrealistic about the level of resources that will be available in the future. So again, I continue to see ongoing dominance of open source in India and Latin America, but a more sophisticated approach to open source technologies as we go forward. I think open source will gain incremental grounds in the developed world and the richer nations, but certainly will continue to be the dominant approach in those that have fewer resources. So I think that the challenge is, how can you take with fewer resources and open source technologies be able to kind of move in the same directions in response to the trends that you're seeing in your own collections, such as more reliance on electronic resources and the need to be able to work more collaboratively across your peers to be able to have large consortia, shared collections, and so forth, again, to be able to get the greatest impact out of your collections through, this shared infrastructure that I was talking about before. So that's the end of what I had prepared to say, and maybe we have time for a few questions.
Thank you so much, Marshall sir, for your excellent session. It's a really insightful session for your observation, your research on library technology, and especially focused on Indian perspective. It's really insightful. I request all of you to make the questions in a chat box. The chat box will be available for 10 minutes. So I request you all to put your question in chat box. So while participant post their question in a chat box, I start my question to Marshall Shall first. Sir, in India, open source software, especially in library automation, are playing a major role. But in the same line, discovery tools are not playing, similar with the library automation tools. So how we should look this perspective? Or what is your observation and research or your experience that we should understand? Yes, sir.
So in the same way that there are open source library automation tools. There's Koa, Folio, and others. So, that's software. And
Hello, sir. We cannot hear your voice, sir. Please unmute. Hello. Please unmute your. Yeah.
I did.
Please.
Yeah. So I guess it went to mute when I closed my screen. So anyway, what I was saying is that while there's lots of open source automation systems like Koa and Folio, there's no open source discovery system. The index that powers discovery, there is no open access version of that. There are large comprehensive indexes like EBSCO Discovery Service, like Summon and Primo from Exlibris, like WorldShare, WorldCat Discovery Service from OCLC, and then kind of broader discovery tools like Scopus and Web of Science and so forth. But there's no pure open access discovery tool. So that really complicates things. So it means that, sure, you can use an open source ILS like Koa, but then how do you provide article level discovery? So far, the main approach to that is by integrating the ILS with Koa with other proprietary discovery tools. Certainly see a lot of activity there between libraries using Koa and then integrating with EBSCO Discovery Service for article level discovery. But there isn't currently, and I'm not optimistic that there will be an equivalent to EBSCO Discovery Service, Primo, or OCLC in a pure open source, open access model. It hasn't happened to date in the 15 years of the development of discovery services to kind of a free version of that based on an open access index. The difficulty and the cost of creating a comprehensive index that covers all scholarly communications is very high. So far that has not happened in the open source and open access arena. So I think the trend is going to continue to be integration with the commercially provided services. That's not. So I wish I was more optimistic about there being a kind of less expensive approach in the future, but so far I'm not.
Yeah. It's a nice observation. Abu Bakr, I think he wanted to say something. Yes, Mr. Abu Bakr, if you want to say something. I think you have a question. Yes, Mr.
Yes,
Abubakar.
my question is, I want to ask nexus between libraries and e-governance.
So I guess I'm not quite sure what you mean
Can you
by,
hear?
I can. I'm not sure what you mean by e-governance.
Yeah, e-governance, what I noticed is I believe libraries can play a big role in promoting e-governance services and programs. So I'm asking which role can the library play in promoting e-governance policies, especially in developing countries like African countries?
So maybe frame it in this way. So of course, libraries are important to supporting society in general, education, literacy, and other goals that a country will have. And as it moves forward in the way that it governs itself and the way it provides services to its citizens. So I think it's just part of the strategy, and you're seeing more of that in developed countries and where libraries are in developing countries where libraries are really focusing on services for the communities to kind of help them develop in positive ways. How that is structured between kind of government and the way they provide their electronic and digital services to the population or traditional means of governance will vary country by country. And I'm not sure I'm seeing global trends on that, but you bring up an important point. And this happens especially in the academic and community and cultural library space, where libraries are very focused on providing services that kind of help the overall trends of society and education and culture.
Thank you.
I think one of the question from Madhuri Kumari. So I request Madhuri ji, please ask your question to Marshall directly.
Okay,
if you
thank you,
want.
sir. Okay, thank you, sir. I'm audible.
Yeah.
Right.
Thank you. It was great insight for the trends of library and technology. But my question is that by the acquiring ProQuest by the Cleverites, this is now huge acquire till now, and this is going to be handled by one entity, and this is going to be centralized, this library and library technology. So country like in India, this is a developing country, and we follow much on the open sources, and these technologies are subscription based and demand so much pay. So how we can developing country can afford that type of technologies in our libraries to make it better for our users, because library services are the for the society culture or welfare of our human being. So what is your take on this? Because this leads to monopoly or some type of centralization. We need decentralization for these technologies.
Yeah, you bring up an important point. I mean, one fears monopolies. And certainly Clarivate, as you know, should it complete its acquisition of ProQuest, will become much larger, but will it be a monopoly? I don't think so. You know, there is still plenty of competition from EBSCO and Elsevier and many other companies. But regardless whether it's a narrowing of options or, you know, even if it's not at the level of what I would think of as monopoly, it certainly has important implications. And I think that for countries like India, you know, companies like ProQuest and EBSCO have been active for a long time. This is nothing new. Clarivate adds to the mix a little bit and makes ProQuest bigger. ProQuest, I mean, EBSCO was bigger before. So again, I think one has to be careful to make sure that there are affordable options to all kinds of libraries. But the presence of large global providers doesn't obviate the possibility for open source and less expensive technologies to be well used in other parts of the world. I don't think that, in the same way that, COA is used all over India and has coexisted there and prospered, even though in other parts of the world, the centralized, more expensive systems have been well used. So, I think that whatever happens, we'll have to take into consideration the limited resources available in the developing countries. It would be unrealistic to think that a company like ProQuest or Clarivate or EBSCO would be able to suddenly, come in and charge a great deal of money for content and services in a way that wouldn't be affordable. I mean, that wouldn't work for them and it wouldn't work for you. So I think what's important is to continue to make sure that there are the open source options for software and that there are means to acquire content, more and more open access content that are within the budgets of libraries in countries like India that simply don't have the large budgets that their counterparts in the developed world have. So I think I'm optimistic about that. I don't see these business changes making it really changing the economics of content and technology in companies like India. I think that the large conglomerates will continue to play some role, and maybe in the larger, better funded libraries of India would be able to take advantage of some of their higher end products and services. But for most libraries in India that have limited resources, I see that there will continue to be affordable options available. Maybe I'm being too optimistic. Hope that addresses your question.
Yes, I think
I see her comment.
there is no another question.
Okay.
And this is really a wonderful session, very interactive. It's sharing your wonderful experience actually, rather than thoughts and idea. So before we end up this session, I have a few words to say all the participants. We are going to create a feedback link. So those who have participated in this session, request you all to give a feedback. Those who give the feedback, the certificate will be given to them only. More than 30 participants are also on a YouTube. So I also request you another one, those who also follow the link on WhatsApp regarding the feedback, because of feedback is very important. And I request, before ending, I request my colleague, Mr. Vijay, for a word of thanks. Yes, Vijay, over to you.
Hello. Am I audible?
There you are.
Yes. On behalf of the FOST Library, PDEU, I would like to thanks to our Director General, Professor Manohan, our Director of the SOT, Professor Sunil Khanna, Director of SPT, Professor R.K. V. Sir, and our Library Committee Chairman, Professor Rajiv Bandyopadhyay. Last but not the least, thanks to our PDU library team for their excellent support to hosting this webinar. Thanks to all those who attend the webinar. We would like to thank today's esteemed guest, Professor Marcel Brady. It's very interesting to hear about your speech on emerging trend in library technology, sir. Sir, you gave a deep knowledge on library technology. Thank you so much for sharing your time and experience with us. We all agree that your speech was very informative and gave us a couple of ideas. Now the webinar declares closed.